To it all. You surprised many with your first team announcement all those years ago. There might have been a few raised eyebrows with the captaincy. Just if you could explain the reasoning of giving the nod to Ken Owens.
Firstly, he's a great man. And looking at the squad, I think if we're picking a team, the way he played in the autumn, I know had come back from injury. I thought he was outstanding in the autumn, and he's probably the number one in that position at the moment. And there are a few other positions where people will be fighting for their spots. He's going to be under some pressure as well, and hopefully everyone's in the same boat. Did contemplate whether we picked a young captain and looked at that for the future. But talking to the other coaches, there's probably a few contenders in that sort of post the World Cup, and obviously there'll be quite a significant change in the squad post the World Cup. So Ken's been picked to do that job at the moment, and I think he'll do a great job.
It's quite a story for Ken because he had that season-long injury before New Zealand a year autumn. Contemplated perhaps at one point not coming back, and as you mentioned, there is a bit of depth in that position as well behind him. Yeah,
there is, and that's part of the challenge for us, trying to create as much depth as possible, sort of building through the Six Nations and into France for the World Cup, and that's going to be a challenge for us. But I've got a huge amount of respect for him, as a person, and I think he'll be popular with the players. He wears his heart on his sleeve. He's got a outstanding rugby intellect, and I think he relates really well to people, and I think he'd be a popular choice for the Welsh also. For uncapped players, if you break them into backs and forwards, the two backs, Mason Grady, Keiran Williams, a glimpse possibly of the future in that midfield, also with Joe Hawkins from the autumn campaign. Yeah, possibly. I think Mason's obviously, he's a big man in terms of that. He's got he's got some development to do, and he's been involved with the squad in the past, even though he wasn't named in the squad. Has trained with the team. Been impressed by a couple of performances that I've seen from him. I think there's definitely more to come. Keiran's a bit different. He reminds me of a younger Scott Gibbs in the way that he sort of plays and his stature and stuff. Fantastic footwork, getting across the gain line. So he's a little bit different, and it's pretty exciting, so it's a great opportunity for him. And for the two forwards, Rhys has been involved with the squad as well, and then for Teddy, it's just an opportunity for him to come in to see what he can bring to the squad. It's a position that we need to develop some depth in. I think the challenge for us is how do I balance a number of older players that have been around for the last few years that have continued to carry on and been part of the squad, and how many changes do you make, how many players that we do bring in, because we need to give some of those youngsters an opportunity during the Six Nations, the World Cup warm-up games leading into the World Cup. So it's a bit of a balancing act, and it's kind of, I think that's reflected in the squad that we've picked. We've picked some experienced players that we want to still be part of it, but we've also got to give a lot of those players in the squad, if you look, they haven't got a lot of caps behind their names, and they need to get some more experience, because we've seen teams in the past that have arrived at World Cups with older players or older squads, and you pick up 3 or 4 injuries, and all of a sudden you're throwing players in that haven't had a lot of experience. That's kind of part of our thinking. It's important that we want to do well in the Six Nations, but we've got to think about the next 10 months as well. Given that, is the Six Nations a bit of a free shot for yourself and the squad, given the troubles of the autumn and the World Cup, as you mentioned? You've got to think about the next 10 months is the bigger picture and the wider picture. There is a bigger picture to look at about this. The Six Nations are never a free shot. I mean, it's important. It's always been important for us, and for us, the Six Nations is when points are at stake. I think the free shot sometimes in the autumn. You don't get a free shot in the Six Nations because it's a competition you want to do well, and it's a competition you want to win. We had a tough game first up, but Ireland at home first up, I think it's a great game for us, and sold out stadium. Something that we can look forward to and preparing for over the next few weeks. Getting Ireland first up, number one in the world, and it's going to be a great challenge for us.
Just a final one from myself. 15 years ago, you came in after Nantes in the World Cup. 4 months later, or 5 months, Wales were winning the first game at Twickenham for 20 years. We all know what came afterwards. Not too dissimilar this time around. Is this a tougher proposition than when you came in all those years ago?
Yeah, probably is a little bit tougher in terms of, there were some of the regional teams that were doing well. We picked a lot of Ospreys players in that first game, and that was, that transition made it easier in terms of, going in that first game to Twickenham. So, yeah, it's there's a lot of expectations on the national team, and the challenge for all of us, I think, in Wales is that we want our regional teams to be competing on a and doing better in the competitions that they played in. It was great to see the 4 of them win on the weekend. It was fantastic, and doing reasonably well in Europe. But the URC is a competition they're involved in, and we've got all our teams in the bottom half of the competition, and 3 of them at the bottom of the competition. So that for us for me is a big challenge, because we go into a Six Nations and there's a huge amount of expectation, and Wales expect us to do well, and the Welsh public expect us to do well in that competition. And we have fared extremely well over the last 20 odd years, during that Six Nations when it was formed, went from the 5 nations. So yeah, look, I'm excited about it, but I'm well aware of that. There are some challenges ahead.
Okay, so we'll come to Graham then for a couple of questions to end the live section.
Warren, just to go back to the captaincy, you made Sam Warburton captain at 22. Did you consider doing something as radical this time rather than a 36-year-old?
I did, yeah.
What was the reason for not going that direction?
The reason was because I spoke about a couple of youngsters and doing that, and the reason was that there's probably 2 or 3 players that would be in contention to do that role post-Cup, but there's possibly an older player that might be ahead of them at the moment, or will be competing for them in that position. So, so we had a good discussion and good debate about, potentially who could be a long-term captain of Wales, sort of post World Cup, and there's some interesting candidates for that, and some strong contenders as well.
You talked about that balance between young players, young blood coming in, and keeping some of the more experienced players. Did you contemplate something more ruthless, getting rid of the guys in their mid-30s? Yeah,
I did.
And what was the thought process?
The thought process is that was something that needed to be done earlier, and I think we're running out of time. So, that some of that experience needs to be in that squad to help with some of those youngsters that are coming through, the players that haven't got a lot of caps to their name. So that was the thought process there.
Could you just tell us about your decision to appoint Mike Forshaw, and what do you think he's going to bring in this squad, whether you see a similarity there with your work with Sean Edwards?
I don't know where someone made up a story about Paul Gusto. I've got to get that out there, because I never had a conversation with him. I don't know, it was interesting read for a few weeks that he was nailed on.
Rob Howley?
What's that?
Rob Howley?
What's that?
Did you want Rob Howley perhaps to come in as well?
Oh, I would have loved to have. I've got a lot of time for Rob. A huge amount of respect, and have worked closely with him. So, with the Forshaw thing, did a lot of homework on him. He's probably got a very similar background to what Sean has in terms of his rugby league experience and playing for Wigan and Great Britain. He's pretty close to Andy Farrell. He felt that the experience he'd had in rugby union, he wanted to challenge himself at the next level. So spoke to a lot of people who rated him extremely highly, not just as a rugby coach but as a person, and that was pretty important to me, getting the right people involved and someone who'll come in here and bring his experience, but also I think fit into trying to create a harmonious coaching group, which is pretty important to me, or very important to me, sort of, going forward over the next few months.
And as Kenneth just said to you, 15 years ago, you came in, you hit the ground running, you won the Six Nations. Looking at what you've got in this group, looking at what the others have got, what Ireland have got, England, France, is it believable that you can do that again?
Well, it wasn't believable 15 years ago, was it? So anything's possible. Look, I'm incredibly competitive, and I'll do whatever it takes to get the squad to a position where I believe they can compete with, some of the top teams in the world, and that's going to take a little bit of time. But I can guarantee you that we'll work incredibly hard over the next number of weeks, and I'm positive that we'll compete extremely well in the Six Nations.
Okay, so that's the end of the live section.